Welcome to Michigan Sports Media Network. Today you're with Jay Sweet, our host, and we have James Gullett, our Red Wings lead reporter, and Brad Thompson, our Tigers lead reporter, with us today. We will start off with Brad, as he will tell us about what's going on with the Tigers.
All right. Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening, Detroit Sports World. Appreciate it. Very happy to be with us too. The launching of the Michigan Sports Media Network. So let's jump into the Tigers and let's just get into the dark cloud hanging over this team right now, and that would be the fact that 2/3 of the outfield right now are out with what I perceive, quite frankly, of significant arm injuries. Granted, it is not a torn rotator cuff on Matt Vierling, but it is a rotator cuff muscle, which whenever you hear the dreaded word rotator cuff, UCL, labrum, you really kind of pucker a little bit. And also with Parker Meadows, they're talking that he's got a nerve issue in his arm. The Angels doctor was talking today, according to Evan Petzold. It's kind of confusing what Evan was writing and tweeting, but I think to decipher it, he's talking about the muscle. I'm sorry, the nerve be able to bounce back. When you hear nerve in an arm, the first thing usually people do is they go, "Oh no, UCL." So right now, I think the Tigers are kind of playing it the right way. They're kind of going close to the vest right now. They really don't want to put anything out there that's going to make people really get nervous, but you really don't feel easy about about the arm issues for the two of them. Now, people would probably want to ask what's going to be the plan, and I wish I knew, and I think the Tigers wish they knew right now. The good news is it's early. You can do almost what we like to call a gong show out there. And what I've been seeing in center field a little bit is I've been seeing a mix of Ryan Kreidler and I've been seeing a mix of Wenceel Perez. Let me say this, Parker Meadows, in my opinion, and I think the stats will show it, and from last year will show it as well, he is hands down one of the top 5 defensive center fielders in the league. I've seen a guy go from the left center field gap to the right center field gap in the warning track and make a catch and not make it look too hard. So we are talking about maybe a 0.5 to a 1 point run differential when he is not in that lineup in center field. Perez is used to being in the outfield. However, that is in right field. He's not exactly gold glove material. And we all know how cavernous Comerica Park can be. They've got Ryan Kreidler out there right now. And as far as I know, Ryan Kreidler played a little bit of center field at UCLA, was drafted as a shortstop. I really think that this is going to be a reach. He's not a good hitter. He's just not a good hitter. When it is a transformation, it's not that hard when you go from shortstop to center field, but it's not exactly like, boom, it's going to hit overnight. He's going to have to get some working out there. So again, right now, I think they're looking to see what they've got with the options out there. I think those two, they're really going to check that out. With right field, same thing. Wenceel Perez did play a good portion of right field last year. We've got to remember that Vierling played all over the outfield, played some third base. Then when Torkelson basically had his down spot, he also played some first base. So Perez does have the reps out there, but he doesn't have a considerable amount. Vierling out in right field as a fixture would have been very, very good for this outfield, and it still can be. Don't get me wrong, but he and Parker Meadows in Comerica are going to take away a lot of hits. So let's just hope for the best there. Regarding third base, Jace Young's having a good spring so far. He really is. He's going to be that, he's a left-handed hitter, which means he would predominantly he would probably be playing with the majority of a lot of right-handed hitters in there. But it's early. It's early. He did okay down the stretch. He was serviceable. He gave the Tigers a spark. I think we all kind of, with the magic that the Tigers caught, I think we're all a little caught up in the Youngs and in the Sweeneys and the Malloys and things like that. They caught lightning in a bottle, and the kids really pushed them across that finish line. So that's a small sample size, albeit it was clutch, and there was a lot of nervous moments in there, and they stepped up. But Now are they going to be able to do over a 162 game season? So with Young in there, it's good that he's playing well. Andy Ibanez, what I would think right now would be moving over there to platoon as a right-handed hitter. Ibanez, again, he's a small sample size guy though. He works in the lineup when the lineup dictates he should be in there. So it's going to be tough. They've got How You Lee in there right now. He's been 0 for 10 in his last 10 plate appearances. So I think he's really going to have to go down to AAA and get some of the at bats there. So I do see them entering the season with Young and perhaps Ibanez, or they could honestly take a look and sign a guy like a Whit Merrifield. I think I said before he's a Tiger killer, former All-Star. But when you hear former All-Star, it doesn't mean that he's going to be playing at All-Star form now. He would almost be like a Gio Urshela. His name's actually been battered around too, but that's really what you're looking at there. You are not going to get vintage Whit Merrifield. But Merrifield could also help out with the DH position, and we can address that down the road here in the podcast a little bit when we get to my favorite Tiger. I'm being sarcastic, and Spencer Torkelson. So that's the third base situation right there. Interesting now is what starting pitcher is going to be in the relief roles. Again, it's going to be a gong show this spring. I think right now we know that Tarek Skubal is the unquestioned ace of this pitching staff. Jack Flaherty, terrific signing, just terrific, and to be able to get Flaherty back after getting Theron Sweeney and Theron Lorenzo. And he hit a ball that I think landed in Plant City, Florida, out of Lakeland the other day. This guy is going to be a guy that we're going to talk about for a long time. But anyways, that get off on a tangent. Flaherty, just solid. He's got the World Series experience. He's the veteran. He's just going to, him and Scooble are really going to have a good effect on this pitching staff. And they're going to have a good effect on Jackson Jobe. I see Jobe is coming in. I think he's going to get that third spot. It's going to be, here you go, big guy. You got all the tools. You're the number one pitching prospect in America in the major leagues. Let's see what you got. He was touching triple digits, which is good for the first March 2nd. Hitting triple digits is just incredible. His spin rate on his curveball was over 3,100 yesterday. So, yeah, he did get touched up for a homer. It's spring training. Guys are working on stuff, but what I'm looking at is his stuff. And the stuff that I saw yesterday, just if we got Jackson Jobe in there at our 3 and he's pitching like he can, that is a legitimate third starter, and he should be the odds-on favorite for Rookie of the Year. Then we get to 4 and 5, and Alex Cobb was supposed to be the guy, and he was a free agent signing, and he is just perennial injured. The hip injury has flared back up. He's got to have 2. He's already had 2 injections. I don't know. I think anything we get out of Alex Cobb at this point in his career is just going to be gravy. I am not counting on him to be an integral part of this pitching staff. Which says, okay, we've got 3 spots. What are we looking at for 4 and 5? And when you really look at it, you're not exactly going to be thrilled. You got Kaiser Montero, you've got Casey Mize, you've got Matt Manning, you've got Kenter Montero, and you've got a guy, Brendan Gunther. Brandon Herder. Brendan Herder. Apologize for that. Mize, we've seen what he can do. He's had a good spring so far in his defense. He's working on a sweeping slider, which he's had some success with. But I think we've had a good look at Casey Mize, and they did not pick his option up. That is something that we definitely need to keep an eye on there. I think he's going to get a shot. I think we're going to see that it's going to be him and Maeda, because I think one is going to make the squad either as the relief pitcher or in the rotation. I think the other one's going to be let go. You've got Matt Manning. Throw him in that mix with Maeda and Mize too. It's hard when you're a starting pitcher to be able to go to the bullpen when you've been a starting pitcher your whole career. It is not as easy as people think. You are pitching in certain situations where you are pitching short term and you are in there for a specific reason. So the people that think out there, with respect to them, it's not easy. So we are going to really be at a crossroads here. Right now with Montero, I think he is going to win one of the starting rotation spots. He's thrown well. Again, it's very early, but I think he's going to win one. They went with the bullpen days last year. They called it, pitching with chaos or pitching chaos. I really would not want to see them do that till after the All-Star break. You're going to tire these guys out. That's when they really started doing it. That's when they caught lightning in a bottle, and that was a big reason. And I'm starting to see that trend happen more and more. It first started with what we call openers, where you put a guy in a reliever in as an opener, and it was the reverse of being a closer, if that makes any sense. But I think AJ does like his matchups. He's better than anybody in baseball with pitching matchups. But I think he'd really like to have a 5-man rotation. If it has to go to 4, then I think he can go with that bullpen day. I just don't think he wants to start it right out of the gate. So if you put me on the spot, I'd say that Montero's going to win that spot. I think they're going to go with the bullpen day on that 5th starter. Right now, I think Manning and Mayan are the odd men out. I really do. Back to relievers here. Tyler Owen. This guy's making a hard case for people not to have him on this pitching staff in a relief role. He's he's sitting at 97 right now. He has touched triple digits. The way he hides the ball, he's got the funky motion. He hides that ball in his release before his release right in the back of his knee. It is really tough to pick up out of there, and his fastball's moving. His curveball is not crisp yet. However, again, early he can get that curveball crisp. I think he's going to be a part of this pitching of the bullpen, and I really think at some point he's going to be relied upon. I'm really starting to lose a little confidence, and he was not great down the stretch about Jason Foley. Got touched up again in his second outing yesterday. I hope it works out for him. The guy was really a big part. But now, the way he ended this year, where basically he did lose his closer role. Bill Brisky came in that role right at the end of the season and in the playoffs. So I think they could be looking at Brisky to do that again with Will Vest being the setup man. Tommy Conley, best changeup in baseball, just my opinion. I think he's going to be absolutely outstanding in that department. And then we've got, again, Tyler Holton, which is easily a top 5 reliever in this game. He could be a starter, but I don't think there's any way they're going to take him out of that out of the bullpen there. He is just way too valuable. Moving on, Spencer Torkelson. First pick overall. Here's an interesting thing that I was reading the other day. He was the first pick that was not drafted first overall pick that was not drafted out of high school. All right, since 1972, a guy by the name of Dave Roberts by the Texas Rangers. Not Dave Roberts, the Dodgers manager. We're talking 1972. Okay, he went to Arizona State, played in a COVID year there, had 6 home runs in a COVID year. I cannot even put that in terms. It's okay. You played 20 games and nobody in the stands. Had a great second season. But let's face it, even though he's played at Arizona State in a very, very, very tough conference in the Pac-10, you're facing guys that are already starting work at they're already working in insurance firms now, or they're working in financial institutions. These guys are not even making the minor leagues. They're 4-year guys. They're in the real world now. So he refuses to make adjustments at the plate. He just refuses to. His bat speed is subpar. All right, he cannot hit the fastball. If you get a guy going 96 or above on this guy with movement, he's lost. He's hitting under 200. What are we doing here? This guy was a guy that was drafted number 1 when you could have had Heston Yurstad, who's going to be a dude for the Baltimore Orioles, and a guy by the name of Garrett Crochet that is just arguably the best left-handed pitcher in baseball right now. He was a hot commodity. White Sox did trade him. White Sox needed as much help as they could get. But I look at Crochet and I say, man, would he look good? And the Tigers just, I don't know. Thanks, Alavila. Casey Mize, number 1 overall pick, and now Torkelson. Fellas, that sets you back. That would be like the Lions just hitting busts. Here's the equivalent. It's the Lions with those two when the Lions drafted 3 wide receivers in a row. Okay, that's how far you could get set back. So I give Scott Harris just a world of credit with what he's done so far, because he's had a lot of challenges in front of him. I think he's came through. But Torkelson, no, send him down to AAA. Fine, been there, done that, got the T-shirt. Okay, he will not hit. He will not hit to the opposite field. He is not going to hit for average at all. And I just don't see him hitting 25 homers or more. He's a right-handed player. He can only play first base. He's lost that. Cole Keith has moved over because we've had we signed Gleyber Torres. Keith is basically taking the first base spot, and that's just the way it's going to be. So Torkelson, you've got basically a power hitting, I guess, right-handed DH. And I think we all know that Kerry Carpenter is going to be predominantly the DH in this lineup. He just is. So I don't see a spot for Torkelson. I see him going down to AAA, or maybe the Tigers making a trade, perhaps to the Pirates, who could use a first baseman right now. The Pirates want to be silly enough to even trade us a bag of balls for him. Take it. I think we can feel through my words how I feel about Torkelson. He is not a major. He is a 4A player. Not good enough for the pros. Little bit better than AAA. That doesn't get it done. So, lastly, what I think right now is a guy that I'm really rooting for, Jahmai Jones. I think I said before that he has his dad played Andre Jones as linebacker for Lions in '92. And his brother, T.J. Jones, was a receiver for 3 years for the Lions just recently. Detroit guy had a good average against lefties, albeit a small sample size, 7 for 22 with the Yankees last year. And he could be a guy that gives you depth in the outfield. They're going to look at him in center field. They're going to look him in right field. So it's going to come down to these last final spots. You've got Perez, who I think is sewn a position up with the circumstances. Justin Henry, Malloy, I think, is sewn a spot up. Ibanez, too. So it could be 2-3 guys for one spot. So that's my Tiger notes and Tigers news for now. So I'll pass it back to you guys.
Can you hear me?
I can hear
Oh,
you now,
okay.
yes.
Well, thanks, Brad. We appreciate the insightful information on the Tigers. I know a lot of Tigers fans are going to be going crazy over some of that. But with that being said, we will pass it to James Gullett, our top Red Wings insider.
Thanks, Jay. Hey, Hockey Town. I'm honored and privileged to be covering this historic franchise for this wonderful city. They don't call it Hockey Town for no reason.
Can't hear you,
Without
James.
further ado, I'll get right into the recap of the most recent roster move that they made that might have a significant impact on this upcoming free agency and trade deadline this upcoming week. Recently, the Wings have traded Valley Uso to the Anaheim Ducks for just future considerations. They're just overall cutting some of their goalie depth, if you can even call it that, to be honest, and freeing up about 3.6 million in cap space, which hopefully will be used to add either a top four defenseman or just clever ways that you can try to manipulate the cap and just add overall depth. Fourth line scorer would be nice. I mean, I think all teams in the league would say that's nice. But this year, Uso had, or I should say, going back, Uso had some nice games and he had a decent stint with the Wings as a whole, but this year he just wasn't cutting it. He's 30, so that he's not going to improve. He kind of is what he is at this point. In his 9 appearances this year, he's only been 1-5-2. So, I mean, with the 2 overtime losses, overall win-loss of 1-7, he's just not making that impact where we need it most. Some of that, I will say, is on the defense in front of him, but Talbot and Alex Lyon have the same defenders in front of them, and they are doing more of that. Uso has allowed almost 4 goals a game at 3.69 and has only a save percentage of 86.6. So he's just overall not getting it done. Even once traded to Anaheim, he's now in their minor league system. He is not up on the main roster. So I don't see him having much of an impact on that. I don't see us getting much in the future considerations, if anything. It might strictly be a cap dump. And I'm all for that with, like I said, his production overall has not been there this year. I'm hoping that we can try to add a much needed defender, as I was talking about, other than Sider and even Johansson. Even after he got off to a pretty hot start his first few games as I'd still call him a rookie. We don't have many good defenders in Detroit. Justin Hall has not been cutting it. Ben Sherratt has not been cutting it, in my opinion. And I know some people will say otherwise on that, but we, as the Wings, need defensemen almost even worse than a goalie because you can put prime Dominik Hasek behind these linemen, and there's going to be breakaways and defensive miscues, and the goalie can only do so much. So, with that being said, we'll see how that move turns out in the future, but I don't really think that could have negative side effects. This was the last year of his deal. There's no dead cap or anything like that coming off. Um, but at least it gives us some flexibility moving forward. And like I said, Friday's the trade deadline, so hopefully we can make a move by then. But with the recent 2 losses to Columbus here, not only did we lose the #1 wildcard spot, because now we're sitting in that #2 spot, um, I don't know if our current positioning will make Steve Yzerman buy or potentially stand pat at the deadline. Um, if they could have pulled out that outdoor game on Saturday, I think we would be buyers and we would be tipping over that fence line of, on the cusp of can we or can't we. Um, but that comes down to probably the main talking point, and I'm sure any Red Wings fan watching this is going to want to talk about, or is already saying just get on with it, is that missed high stick call on Saturday night, because that would be, if anyone is not a hockey fan watching this, that would be like the equivalency of the Kelvin Johnson no catch against Chicago. Like, it is something that by rule, and just looking at it with your eyes, you don't even per se need insight. Just you can just watch the play and know you shouldn't be able to do that. The national announcers, because it was an outdoor game, it was not Bally Sport or FanDuel Sports Network. It was not the hometown guys. It was not Mickey Redmond and Ken Daniels. It was the national uh, announcers for ESPN. Even they kind of were like, "What are they doing?" Um, Danforth on the Columbus Blue Jackets literally just hit Simon Edvinsson in the face with his stick and went around him and somehow got his own rebound and scored what ended up being the game-winning goal with about 2.5 minutes left in the third period. And if it was called properly, at least in my opinion, because I mean they didn't call it, it was a tie game 3-3 at that point. That would have given the Wings one of the best power plays in the league. If I'm not mistaken, I believe they're the 3rd best power play right now. A 2-minute advantage with 2.5 minutes to go in the game. And going into the game, they were tied with Columbus, dead even on points, dead even on games remaining. They don't have a game in hand on each other, or vice versa. So this game was absolutely pivotal, and it's not make or break, but the Wings do have statistically the toughest remaining schedule of the year. So it's not going to get any easier. So to have something go against you that is out of your control is obviously not great. And I do know that Coach McClellan said, it shouldn't leave it in the hands of one play. Could have done 20, 30, 40 things different in different periods, different time spans that would have made that play a non-factor. And all that is true technically, but in the heat of the moment, right then and there, it was not the I would just say not the best call, and I'll just leave it at that. Um, Before I go on too much of a tangent. Um, Lastly, the next game is today at 7. Probably past due by the time this airs. We'll play Carolina, who got off to an extremely hot start to the season. They were, I want to say, 10-2 their first 12 games, and if I'm not mistaken, they were 14-4 their first 18 games. However, we're playing them now, not then, and they are currently on a 3-6 streak their last 9 games played. So they are cold themselves right now. So if we can catch them at a great time, hopefully, and they should be, the Red Wings will be motivated from their lack of luck. And maybe they can start using this as a momentum, kind of like the Lions after they got beat by, oh, I'm spacing.
Tampa Bay.
Tampa Bay, thank you. And that, they kind of, I don't want to quite say took them for granted, but they used that to catapult them, motivate them, and then they just went on a tear after that. So I'm hoping the Wings can use that as the motivational game. Overall, since the coaching change, the team has looked almost night and day difference. McClellan's been a heck of a coach for us. So hopefully we can win tonight, get everything back on track, and then with the added cap space that we mentioned before, hopefully a little bit of momentum building up into the trade deadline. Hopefully we just make one or two moves. I don't think anything sizable, but still just something in the depths that will help the team out with some fresh legs, get a more even rotation. I know Sutter is amazing, but I don't know if playing 25, 26 minutes a night is sustainable, especially doing a playoff run and all that as well. Um, but we will see what happens as it happens.
Thanks, James. I appreciate the insight, and now we will open this to a panel discussion. Brad, the floor is yours.
To the Wings, I really think that this is going to speak volumes for Stevie Yzerman. He is going to plain and simple say, if he's a buyer at the deadline, then he thinks they got a shot. Now, I'm not saying shot all the way to the cup, but this team going into this season was expected to make the playoffs. Clearly, they're in contention to do so. Clearly, they need not just one but two defensemen to do so. I think it's important to get in because I think players like a Raymond and a Larkin and a Sider, they need to have that taste. It is past due that they've gotten a taste of the playoffs now. If they get in the first round, they go out 4-0, then they do. But I think if he doesn't, boy, he's going to be on the hot seat next year. If he's just going to stand pat and say, okay, we're going to roll the dice, and let's say they don't make it. Now, they were one game last year out of not making it. We all know that. They don't make it this year. I don't see. This is why when you bring the hometown hero in, the Joe Dumars who did win it, who did win championship for us, but the way he exited is just, dang, man. And an Alan Trammell, even though Trammell came back, these guys just lose their luster. And I don't think Yzerman would, but it's still going to be something that we don't forget. He came back and he didn't get it done, and he got it done in Tampa. Why couldn't he get it done here? I think it's an indictment on him. He has not addressed the defensive situation at all. And with the goalies, like you said, goalie's the last line of defense. Well, if you let him get through the last line of defense, then it's just a 50-50 win. Not asking him to have the best goaltenders in the world, but that does have to be upgraded as well. We can talk about that on Wednesday with some names. But Stevie Y, man, this is it. Because next year, there are no excuses. You are squarely on the hot seat.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate that. James, anything to add?
Yes, I'm glad you brought it up because anytime I criticize Steve Yzerman, I get blasted online. But in my opinion, I have stated for almost a year and a half now. If in this season, not next or anything else, in my opinion, this season, if we do not make playoffs, I would like a change at the GM spot. I don't know any other sport or any other city that will hire a new GM and give them 6 years of no playoffs and let them keep their job. Like you said, he got it done, multiple Stanley Cups with Tampa Bay. I know he came into an absolute terrible situation left behind by Ken Holland, but it's year 6, man. I mean, we still have no defense. We do have some goalies in the pipeline, but obviously they're not here yet. So I want to talk about this team, this playoff run, and he let us down. There's no other way around that right now.
All right. Anything to add to that, Brad?
He's completely right. I'm willing to give Yzerman another year, and that's it. I mean, that it's just plain and simple. It is paramount. Again, it is paramount to get your stars, and these are stars. Larkin, Raymond, Insider, they got to get a taste. It is way past due. They have been in our organization, Larkin longer, but Sider and Raymond have been playing at a high level now for a few years. They go by another year without playoff taste. I don't know, but Yzerman, get it done. It's not popular. You're right, James. It's not popular to say, how dare you speak of the holy Steve Yzerman. Well, you know what? We'll remember you as a hell of a player. We don't need, we don't think you're a great GM right now. At least I don't, and you don't. But hey, we're gonna get killed on social media for this. But
Yeah.
hey, feelings are for the bedroom. And Yzerman, that's it. I'm done. He doesn't get it done next year. I'm out.
Awesome. Awesome discussion, guys, on the Red Wings. Now, moving on to a different sport, we will be talking a little bit of Lions, a little bit of NFL to wrap this show up. To start it off, obviously, Myles Garrett. That's the big thing right now for the Lions. For me, I don't see this deal getting done for Detroit, unfortunately. There have been rumors that last year we were the most aggressive team coming in to try to, pry the all pro pass rusher away. And I think that made sense last year because we lost Hutch. It felt like we were on the fucking roll, guys. Like we were killing everybody, it seemed. We went 15-2 without half of our team. And I feel like it made sense at that point for Brad to say, you know what, I'll give up 2 1s for Myles Garrett because not only do we get him this year, we get him for, the next, who knows, 3 years probably. And you get to try to go after a Super Bowl this year, and you also get to use him as you try to get over that hump. But right now, unfortunately for everybody in the NFL, it's sounding like the Eagles. And I really, really hate that. If they're willing to give up, 3 first-round picks, that'd be cool. I'd feel a little bit better if that were the case. But if they go ahead and give 2 firsts and, a player maybe for Garrett, I'll be a little not upset that we didn't get him, but I'll be more upset that the Eagles did. That's the one team I really don't want to get him. The other team that has been linked to him that I really, really don't want him to go to, the Washington Commanders. As we saw, they just traded for Deebo Samuel. When I saw the trade, I was like, oh, maybe that means they're a little bit, colder on the Myles Garrett sweepstakes. No. They gave up a 5th-round pick. They took on, what was it, $20 million. They still have the cap. They still have the picks. They still have Jonathan Allen, which quietly, okay, might be the reason why the Commanders end up getting Myles Garrett. I don't think the Eagles or the Lions can offer a player right now of Jonathan Allen's caliber. And that's not to say that Jonathan Allen's, a top 5 defensive tackle in the league. He's been injured. He even when he did play this year, he wasn't, to his standard. But coming off of an injury, you can't really expect 100% out of a guy who sat. I think it was 15 or 16 games this week. He might not, or this year, he might not even have played to the playoffs, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But he's on a 1 year deal for $16 million if he gets traded to whoever takes him on. The Browns, that could make sense. And not to say he'd be the piece of the trade, but if we're talking about draft picks, let's say everybody's willing to give up 2 firsts. Commanders can throw Jonathan Allen on top of that, sweetens the deal, and makes the Browns feel a lot better about losing their all-pro defensive end. Obviously, Allen's more of a defensive tackle, but having something on that defensive line would make you feel better because they really don't have much if Garrett leaves. And that's, I think, why they are really adamant about not moving him. I believe that the Browns will have to trade him. I don't see a way that Garrett stays there at all whatsoever. I feel he has made it very clear he wants out. He will not sign a new extension. If the Browns don't trade him now, he's going to leave in 2 years, which I guess isn't the worst case for them, but you're going to have a real pissed off Myles Garrett, and he might be making some business decisions. You know what I'm saying? So I feel the Browns are using this as leverage. It's like at the combine in the interviews when they say, "Oh, we're not trading Myles Garrett," and then Brad Holmes comes out and says, "We're probably not going to get a premier pass rusher." I think they're talking to each other. Okay, call me crazy, but I think Andrew Barry, or yeah, I believe that's their GM's
Yeah.
name. He is right now saying, "You guys aren't giving me the package I want. You're not going to get him." Right? And Brad Holmes is going, "I don't want to give you the package you want. We're not going to get him." I feel like that's kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge type of situation there, where Brad is kind of letting it be known he's not willing to move off of the deal he already put out there, while Barry is making it known, "Hey guys, I haven't got the offer I want. Keep coming." So that's really all on the Myles Garrett front. I unfortunately don't think the Lions will get him, and I don't know if I really want them to in terms of how much we'd have to trade. Obviously, if you tell me today we trade 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick for Myles Garrett and we win a Super Bowl, I'm doing it. If we can guarantee that, but we can't, unfortunately. It's a sport of football. And as the Lions saw last year, injuries happen to your stars. What are you going to do if you trade 2 firsts for Myles Garrett and he tears his ACL? He's 30 years old, coming off an ACL tear. It's going to be hard to get over, especially when you have to give him $30+ million a year, which it's been reported he doesn't necessarily want a new deal right away, but probably next season he will, and it'll, if not an extension, it'll be a restructure. But next we have the draft class is really deep, specifically at the defensive line spot. Interior defensive line specifically might be the deepest I've ever seen it. Now, keep in mind, I started doing this in 2013 with the draft. So I haven't seen every draft ever. But this interior defensive line class is so deep, you're going to get guys, excuse me, you're going to get guys in the third round that you could get that you would normally draft early second. And that's what I think. I think it's a super deep class. We'll be able to draft hopefully 2. And as we saw at the combine, there's a ton of athletes along the defensive line, especially at the edge position. Now, the edge is not the deepest position in the draft, but I think you can get a starter in the first 2 rounds. A guy like Shamar Stewart probably solidified himself as a top 15 lock, and he's a guy that people thought might be a early second rounder. Some people had him mocked there pretty early, which kudos to them for seeing it. But the production just wasn't there, so I also understand the other opinion. Now, a guy like Landon Jackson, he also wowed at the combine. Also could be available at our second round pick, and he fits what we need. He's 6'5", 6'6", 270, had a 40-inch vert, ran a pretty solid 40 time. I think it was a 4.68. He's not necessarily your most elite athlete like Shamar Stewart, but I think he showed on tape that he can do some things that would fit for Detroit, and then kind of wowed at the combine as well. Outside of that, this is a super deep class in general along the defensive line. Brad Holmes is has had the most visits for any GM for the edge position. Where do you think we're going first round? Or second round? I could see either or, and I think that's why he's having so many visits, because he wants to kind of weed it out, and I think he's going to go best player available. So I could see us going interior offensive line. I could see us going interior defensive line. I could see us going edge in that first round pick. I think it'll be one of those three, though. If it's not, I don't really know where else you go. Hopefully not wide receiver, because this class is pretty weak, especially in that first round. I think if we're going to draft a wide receiver to play the X, it could be like a third round, fourth round guy. Somebody like Jalen Noel would make a lot of sense. There's quite a bit of those X receivers that'll be had late. But really, outside of that, I don't really see us going anywhere else. And then, with that being said, the NFL rumors, to kind of pivot a little bit. The NFL rumors right now are kind of swirling. As we know, Deebo Samuel just got traded for a fifth round pick, and Stafford is going back to LA. Before we talk too much about NFL rumors specifically, let's go ahead and open this discussion to a panel to talk about some Lions football.
First off, with Garrett, I don't want him.
Oh,
And I don't want him because there are no guarantees in life. There are no guarantees in football. You can't give up that kind of draft capital. The way I see it is I want to see the Lions, personally, I want to see them like the Ravens. I want to see them like the Eagles. I want to see them like the Seahawks. I think you know where I'm going with this. I want to see them contend every single year. And if you go all in with Garrett, then if you could guarantee me this, how about this? You could guarantee me that they're going to be able to keep JMO, Kirby, Brian Branch, all the Jameer, all the guys they have to sign coming down the pipe, and it's coming quicker than we think. I don't want to give them up. With Garrett, we saw anything can happen, any injury can happen. He had 14 sacks last year. I believe Zadarius Smith had 9, and I know that people are going to say, well, you know what? They take it up a notch in the playoffs, and Garrett probably would too because he's never been there. But again, it's high risk, all right, huge high risk. But again, if you could guarantee me we keep those guys win a Super Bowl, well, hell, I'll be the first one. I'll be there on his door to have him sign a contract. But I think there's guys in the draft. I really do. I can't do it. I don't want to look. I don't want to be myopic. I want to be a contender every single year because I think we saw that I'm sorry, not Philadelphia. That Buffalo is one step away. Ravens could be one step away, and we're saving that. We're saying that almost every single season. San Francisco, we're saying those things. I want to be one of those teams that always has a kick at the can. So.
yeah, for sure, Brad. I totally agree with that. I would say that, like you said, the only way that I can really make that trade is if you can guarantee these things, and you just can't, especially in today's NFL. Now, the only thing with that is there's a chance the cap keeps going up, and maybe, we can make that happen. And Brad would know, but better than I would. And we saw the cap went up $10 million more than what it was supposed to this year, and that'll likely just kind of keep climbing. Now, with that said, I also agree this is a really good draft class. So I think I trust Brad Holmes, and I would rather go by the pass rush by committee approach, which is what we saw Philadelphia do. Call me crazy, right? They had a guy, Josh Sweat. He's not elite. He had 8 sacks in the regular season this year. His best season ever is like 12 sacks. He came in and had 2.5 sacks in the Super Bowl. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The Chiefs' offensive line actually was not that great this year. Outside of their 3 interior guys, their tackles were so-so, especially on the right side. They had to move their left guard, their all-pro left guard, to left tackle. Now, Jalen Carter. So let me back this up a little bit. I find it funny a lot of people say the Lions need to be more like the Eagles when what they're proposing is not like the Eagles. We have a guy who's an all-pro first teamer, Mr. Aiden Hutchinson. The Eagles have an all-pro first teamer in Jalen Carter. We have a guy who's a little bit older, but he's productive and he plays well. That's their Josh Sweat, Brandon Ingram type, or Brandon Graham, excuse me. We have Ali McNeil, who is on his way to elite, which I would say is a little bit better than what the Eagles have as a secondary guy. The Eagles have Nolan Smith, who's pretty solid too. But we could come in and sign a guy like Khalil Mack, which is what I would love. Give him a 1 year deal for like 18 mil. Sign another guy for let's say 5 to 8 million, like a Pat Jones, which I love. I'm a big fan of Pat Jones. Played for the Vikings the last 2 years. Has had over 7 sacks, I believe, both seasons. And he's a guy you can get for probably 5 million a year, and he can play all over the defense at 6'4", 270, which is what we like. And then I would draft a guy, and that way you have three for the price of one at that point, in what you would be giving up for Myles Garrett, and essentially you still keep another pick. And don't get me wrong, I would love to add Garrett if he was a free agent, but he's not. With that said, let's pass it on to James and let you have the floor.
Thanks, Chase. Um, I'm no stranger to being on an island, and I would absolutely trade the house for Myles Garrett. There's more than one way to build a team, and you both bring up absolutely valid and wonderful points. Um, there's no doubt that the pass rush needs to be addressed, and some of that will remedy itself when we get Hutchinson and McNeil back. Just simply getting healthy adds two top five people at their position. I think McNeil's top five at D tackle, and Aiden's without a doubt top five at defensive end. So just getting healthy will help significantly with the defense. But pass rushers of Myles Garrett's skill set, standards, level don't grow on trees. Um, you bring up a great point, and like you said, you can have three guys that gives you depth because, as Brad said, you're one injury away from who knows what's going to happen. But at the same time, I don't think a D line, at least in recent memory, would have the power of Hutchinson, McNeil, Reader, and Garrett when healthy. And yes, you hope they stay healthy. Nothing's guaranteed at all. But with a defense like that, you don't have to blitz. You can drop your linebackers into coverage. So much opens up for you. It gives you just so much room to play. As you guys, as everyone has seen with um, the Super Bowl, Philly's D line only rushed four and had pressure all day long. It made everything else. The corners have to cover less. Um, I mean, I can't imagine giving Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch like telling me like there's a second to 2 seconds less you have to cover your guys every play now, and it is kind of an all-in move. As you said, the draft does have a lot of talent, but it's not deep, in my opinion, at the edge position. It is deeper at D tackle, but picking 28th this year, and if we were to pull the trigger for Myles Garrett, I imagine we would pick no earlier than 28th again. I don't think we're going to draft a talent of that level with those picks. You can always find a diamond in the rough. Max Crosby, I believe, was a fifth-round pick. But once again, you can't just say, "Oh, I'll just draft the next Max Crosby," like it's that easy. But I would go in. This is the draft that, in my opinion, you could pass on. You're not risking like your future. We've had two first round picks the last couple years between Hutch, JMO, and then back to back with Gibbs and Campbell. And eventually they're going to have to pay all of these guys planning on keeping them. They're all productive players. As Brad said, their dues are coming up. They're going to get off these rookie contracts. We may not be able to keep all of them, but as Jay said, the cap went up an additional 10 million more. So if you do the trade for Garrett, it's going to at least take two firsts, in my opinion. That's two less firsts you're going to have to pay. So what you would have paid those rookies, you can give to Garrett instead, who's already a proven veteran, already all pro, however many years, and certain accolades here. Like, we've been saying as Lions fans for how long that we need to get Hutchinson a running mate. And I feel like if you get Myles Garrett on this team, Hutchinson might be the running mate for Garrett instead of vice versa. Like, absolutely no disrespect to Hutchinson, but uh, Garrett's just in a league of his own. I think Garrett, Crosby, and Hutch are probably the top three, throwing Micah Parsons and maybe TJ Watt to round out the top five pass rushers in the league. And I just don't think an opposing offense could handle that D line. And yes, it is assuming everyone's healthy. It is assuming um, the cap continues to go up because that would also be if you trade for Garrett, if you extend him. I believe that our money for JMO, our money for our branch would be in the next couple years be a cap space increase. And I would hope, once again, it is hope, it's not a great plan, but I would hope that maybe the players can take a slight hometown discount to remain with such elite players. Once again, it's hope everyone has the money or everyone wants the money. As Hutch just had a broken leg, as Brad said, you can have an ACL tear at any moment. And Lee McNeil did have an ACL tear. You don't know quite how you're going to bounce back from those. So the players want their money. They deserve their money, but you just, I hate using this as the reference point because it's a Madden term, but you just don't get pass rushers like this. Like it would be like a Madden kind of move, and it's an all-in move. And it's, to me, the kind of move that the Rams made when they got Stafford. They traded their multiple picks. They kind of mortgaged their future, and they're not so hot right now. I mean, they did make the playoffs, but um, this could be our move, though. Like, Brad Holmes comes from the Rams front office. There's no elite name in this draft. I know we're not picking at the top of the draft, anyways, but I feel like this is the year to say F those picks and just go get them. And like I said,
Yeah,
I'm like, you guys have both made valid points as to why we shouldn't. And when it was getting to my turn, I was like, wait a second, maybe they make a good point. Maybe it's not. But I'm like, man, I just can't ignore a D line of Garrett, Hutch, McNeil, and Reader. Like, I can't imagine
yeah.
how easy the job for Angeloni and Campbell would be back there, and just everything would just flow together. Once again, it does assume that we're going to be healthy and all that, but God forbid, if Hutchinson goes down or someone else like that, it will lessen the blow because we still have that perennial guy that does demand a double team on almost every play. Because if you double team Garrett, then you're single teaming Hutch. You can leave the line or the tight end in the chip, but there's only so much you can do. And to me, that's just too good to pass up. I would go and give, two first. I don't know about three. I know you mentioned if Philly gives them three. I'm like, I don't know about that, but like a two first and then maybe a younger guy like a Pascal that just needs a fresh place. High second round pick just hasn't really landed here in my opinion. Shows flashes from time to time, but I think he'll be a nice piece in addition to the picks that might intrigue Cleveland to potentially make the deal. Or if you want to just go ultimate troll, you can potentially send Zadarius Smith back to his former team, and that's more for the memes. But yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, I really, really good points there, and I definitely can't disagree. And that's kind of the cool part about this Myles Garrett conversation is that we're all kind of saying the same thing, right? The Lions need to get better pass rushers. At the end of the day, how you do that or how Brad Holmes does that at the end of the day won't really make me mad. I mean, if he trades two first for Myles Garrett, I'll say, sweet, we got Myles Garrett. If he doesn't, and he does the thing I said and go pass rush by committee,
yeah,
sweet, that works for me. But at the end of the day, like I said, I think we're kind of saying the same thing here. Brad, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, back to Garrett with and you just mentioned Zadarius Smith. We wanted Zadarius Smith because he was actually pretty good this past or for Cleveland beginning of the year, right?
yeah,
That's be, right. That's because he had Myles Garrett on the other side. We've got Hutch on one side. Whoever's on that other side is basically going to be. It could be Smith again. Could be Khalil Mack. Uh, boy, I'd rather have a short-term deal with Khalil Mack and then get another 1 year or 2 year deal with whoever else is up. We've got our Myles Garrett. I don't plethora of riches would be great, but let's have that plethora being the guys that we already have. The dance with the devil we know. I think that Brad Holmes and all the other franchises we said that want to be contenders, Brad will trade capital the day of the draft, and I'm cool with that. But the way I see it is you build a team through the draft and you sprinkle in the free agents accordingly, and you don't break the bank. I got a feeling Chicago's going to Chicago and think they're going to win the offseason because they're going to go out and they're going to spend lavishly thinking that they're going to buy their team. They're going to buy their way in. You don't do that in the NFL. You build through the draft. It's cliche, but darn it, it's true. Sprinkle in the free agents like a DJ Reader. Things like that. We've got our Garrett. 2 would be great, but not at the expense of what we can have basically almost permanently. Keep our window open. We go with Garrett, that window's going to close, and it's going to close fast. So,
Yeah, really good points there too from you, Brad. I think that wraps up our Lions discussion today. But moving on to some more NFL conversations here, we have some news coming up. Now, obviously, the combine was this past week, and all the coaches and GMs are there talking to each other, and so we get a lot of rumors out of this because a media guy might be walking by and he hears, I don't know, the Browns mention Myles Garrett to the Eagles GM, and then he's like, oh, talks are heating up. So with that being said, so far Stafford's returning to the Rams. We know that for sure. The Jets are moving on from Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. They're going to cut Devontae Adams by the end of the week. I actually just got a notification for that as we were talking, which is not, I mean, a surprise to anybody, I hope, because he was due $40 million this year. Like, that's insane. That's just ridiculous for a 30-something-year-old wide receiver. I think he's 32 now. But rumors are swirling that wherever Rodgers ends up, Devontae will follow, which kind of makes sense. I think at this point of their careers, they're on the same, uh, you know, uh, growth path, I guess is a way to put it. But we've also got some rumors of Anthony Richardson being on the trade block. I don't know what to think about those. I feel like that might be it might be true, but I could also see it being a like leaked from the team that wants to trade for him, if you know what I mean, to try to worm their way into that locker room. Because if you start putting out that Richardson's a locker room issue, and then you're gonna want to trade for him and blah 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 blah. So I don't know. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Jonah Jackson is seeking a trade from the Rams. I want to hear some thoughts on possibly picking him up. Obviously not via trade. His cap hit is way too much for the player he is. But there is very high likelihood he gets cut. Because the Rams would save quite a bit of money with that move, and I think I'd like to bring him back if for the right price. If we can get him for a 2 year, 12 million, $13 million deal, I think that's pretty solid for a guy like him. And that makes it to where we can draft someone a little bit later this year, give him a year to sit, and then we have Mahogany and whoever we draft as our starters next season. Because obviously, I think it's pretty obvious Zeitler's coming back. Um, and then we have some Jair Alexander rumors. The Packers are going to move on from him. Um, Kind of intriguing. And then let's talk about some quarterback landing spots as well. Um, and then we have, Rodgers, Darnold, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields are kind of the big names of this free agency class. And then Debo Samuel obviously was traded to the Commanders, and Cooper Kupp is available, but we haven't really heard too much on that. So now we will turn this over to a panel discussion, and we will go ahead and start with the Anthony Richardson rumors. Brad, the floor is yours.
uh, it's not time to give up on Anthony Richardson. I do believe that he has really. I don't know if he's going to be welcomed in that locker room. he's young, and when you're 20 and 21, I don't even want to think about the mistakes that I've made. But he's getting paid like a pro. I understand that. Um, he is gonna have to be traded, in my opinion. He needs to change the venue. I think the Raiders would absolutely be a great fit, a perfect fit, to be honest with you, because they've got a man named of Tom Brady there. And if anybody can mentor a young quarterback, and anybody that can kick the crap out of a young quarterback if he acts up, who commands and demands the respect and will get it from Richardson, is Tom Brady. And there still is a little voice from above ringing in Mark Davis's head from his dad Al, saying, "Hey, we win with the long ball, and Anthony Richardson can chuck it from the 10 to the end zone. And you want to get a speedster, you want to get a burner on that other side. Yeah, I'm all in for Anthony Richardson if I'm the Raiders. Other teams, I'm not so sure, but the Raiders is the fit with Brady being there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with the fit. I just think if the Colts move on from him so fast, that's kind of crazy because it's not like he's looked terrible. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
I just feel that would say something about that coach and GM pairing that they want to get out so fast. That says a lot about Anthony, I think. But James, you have anything to add?
Um, I do like the fit a lot. The Raiders were not the team that really jumped to my head, but you convinced me through your argument that the Raiders would be a perfect spot for him. I do think the Colts should do something to move on from him. I was not a big fan of his on draft day. He is and I'm going to try to limit this because then I'm going on a rant. He is the epitome of a guy who has all the tools and then just can't put it together. Um, we have seen so many guys come through the NFL that got drafted way too high because people were just betting on their potential. And besides Josh Allen, who I mean worked out fantastically, um, not there's probably 20 bucks per one success story about guys that are just built on potential or drafted on potential. Um, but I, and from the Lions' perspective, I mean, I wouldn't do anything with them, but we'll
Yeah,
see what.
I can agree with that. I mean, the only way that I really would move or make a move for him is if it was like a third rounder and Hendon Hooker. Anything more than that is like, and that's only because he's so young. But moving on to our next point, Jonah Jackson. Like I said before, I personally love the idea of bringing him back. I think he would be a better player here in Detroit, like he was before. I think he fits our scheme a little bit better. And I think we could get him for pretty cheap, as long as the Rams cut him. Obviously, like I said, I do not want to trade anything for him, especially at his cap number. I wouldn't trade anything for him if he was making 7 million, but he's making like 15 or 17 or something crazy. But with that being said, Brad, the floor is yours.
Yeah, if I had assurances that Kevin Zeitler is gonna resign, I'm okay with it. Uh, I guess that would signal that we're going to move on from Graham Glasgow, which I have zero problem with. I think that in that Minnesota game, I still can't keep. I mean, he missed that reach block and he almost got Gibbs murdered. He's done that a few times this year, and if you're gonna murder someone like Jameer Gibbs, it's too much of a risk. I think his best days, I think even his worst days are behind him. So I would be fine with Jonah Jackson in that route, knowing you got Mahogany behind him to step in. Jackson, the injuries concern, it concerns me. Knowing that we've got an insurance policy and we could draft an insurance policy, absolutely. But the key for me is you've got to have Zeitler back. If you don't, I mean, I, I I don't know. I would rather go through the draft on that for sure and use a high draft pick. You could get by with a Glasgow, I guess, but I don't see it. So
All right, James.
I agree 100%. I would absolutely adore Jonah Jackson coming back. I was upset when he left until I saw the price tag.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, once he went to the Rams, and I do watch plenty of Rams games. Um, for whatever reason, they started him at center, and then they complained that his performance went down when he was a Pro Bowl level left guard for the Lions. So I'm like, I would be more than happy to bring him back, like you said, pending price. Um, I believe you said 2 years, like 13. I mean, I would A plus if we can get him for that. Absolutely. Like without a doubt, I would get him for that. But put him back where he belongs at guard, watch him excel. There is the injury concern, but that's why we also have depth pieces like Salsdal, uh, Mahogany until he's ready for that full-time starter role. As you guys touched on Zeitler, I would not hesitate to bring him back, but I have heard a lot of rumors linking him to the Bears and following, you know, Ben Johnson and unfortunately so many other players, or coaches, I should say, over there. So hopefully we can keep him. Even if we do keep him, I know he's starting to get up there in age as well. He's somewhere in his low to mid 30s. I would still bring Jonah Jackson back even if we do get Seidler back. But um, if we don't get Zeitler back, I would say Jackson if cut, because like I said, I'm not touching that contract. But if cut, I think he might be the number one free agent that the Lions should go after.
Yeah, and really good thoughts there. On the Zeitler front, he ain't going nowhere. He ain't leaving. His wife tweeted out, we're going for another year with Lions colored hearts." So I mean, it seems like his decision's made for him, but which is really good for us. I mean, I don't really. I guess there's a small chance that he leaves, but why go to the Bears? You know, they're not ready to win. He came to Detroit to win. He wants to be a part of this offense. I just feel like he's smart enough to understand the Lions are the winning team. The Bears, it's going to take 2 years. And like you mentioned, he's 35, about to be 36.
Okay.
So he's got one more year, and that's about it. But moving on to another NFC North foe, we have Jair Alexander on the trade block. Now, this discussion isn't necessarily about him coming to Detroit, but I would like to talk about that too. This discussion, though, is how funny is this? Jair Alexander, the corner who was supposed to lock everybody down. Amon Ra ain't getting shit. Blah, 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 blah. He ain't played a real game in seems like 2 seasons. This dude is just injured as injured can be, and he's collecting over $20 million a year to do it, and that's why the Packers want to cut him, or trade him, I should say. I have heard though that if they can't trade him, they will cut him, and that actually doesn't help their cap that much. I don't know off the top of my head the exact numbers, but I know they're not clearing up a ton of cap if they do that move. But with that being said, if he gets cut, I wouldn't hate bringing him in, right? But I don't think it would be a great idea, just because I don't think he would really fit here. The only good part about it is he has, lockdown corner potential, and he's only 28 years old, and we could probably get him for a pretty cheap price. But well, and Brad Holmes likes to bring in often injured players that have a lot of potential. But I just don't think he would fit here, and especially being a Packer for his whole career, I just feel like there's probably some bad blood with these guys. But Brad, the floor is yours.
Uh, as far as it being a fit here, first of all, if he's a free agent, I guarantee you he would be vetted by Holmes and Campbell up and down and side to side, because that locker room is tough to get in, and I mean that a good way. You have to be a VIP character grit kind of guy to get in that locker room. So if he gets in that locker room, I think that all past sins can be forgiven by the players. And one good trip to the strip bar with him and St. Brown can solve a hell of a lot of things. It just really can. Um, I don't think he wanted to be in Green Bay. I think he could have played those last 3 or 4 games. I don't like that. I hate hearing that. It's selfish. Again, if Holmes and Campbell say, you know what, this guy can play for us and he can be a good fit, I'll do whatever they say. 4 years at 40, Holmes and Campbell signs off on it, get it done.
Yeah, and I mean I can't disagree with that. He's definitely got the All Pro or at least Pro Bowl potential, like we mentioned before. But James, you have anything to add?
Oh, not really. At 4 years 40, if that's going to be um, possible, I might pull the trigger on that. When we started the discussion, I was going to say I'm not going to touch him just because he is hurt all the time. But I will say for only 10 a year, with the cap constantly going up, he is a lockdown corner when healthy. He kind of reminds me of a cornerback version of Ziggy Ansah. He's a heck of a player, but can he ever get on the field? So for the right price,
Yeah, that's very true.
yeah.
And actually, to pivot this conversation just a little bit to another corner who recently was moved on from his team, Darius Slay was cut today. And a lot of people, are talking about bringing him back, which I wrote an article about. You can check that out on misportsmedia.com. Little quick plug. But I feel like Slay. Would be a good addition at an extent. Personally, I think Slay is a good but not great corner. At this point in his career, he's about to be 34 years old. And last year, actually, this might surprise some people. Last year, he had one of his best seasons as an Eagle, period. In terms of pass deflections, QBR, and all those things, completion percentage allowed. So I think he could come in and actually offer something on the field. Now, he's not going to be an all pro. He's not going to be a pro bowler. He's not even going to be a starter. Call me crazy, but Darius Slay would not start on this Lions team right now. I feel like Robertson's a little bit better. I feel like Arnold's a better corner, and if we bring back Davis, he's obviously better, I think. But Slay on a 1 year, $8 million max deal, I think would be perfect. And he's a Detroit guy. He mentioned on the St. Brown podcast not so long ago that there's only two places he can see himself playing in the NFL next season, and that's Detroit or Philadelphia. And obviously, Philadelphia doesn't want him because they just moved on to save only $4 million. They had to eat $11 million or $9 million to move on from this contract. So just think about it that way. But Brad, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think Philly moved on because they've got Cooper DeJean and they've got Quinion Mitchell, who definitely stepped through, and they're going to show that they're going to be fixtures there probably for the next 7 to 10 years, provided they can be kept, through free agency and fix. Slade, I honestly, Slade was a Pro Bowler this year, right?
I don't know.
I think he was. I think he made. Well, I'm sorry. I think he made the Pro Bowl. Obviously didn't play in it. I think he did. I could be wrong. Been wrong before, but here's my thing. If they got you know, Mitchell and DeJean there, and they're moving on, well, okay, that's great. But I don't think Darius Slay in his final year, as he stated, is going to want to come over to Detroit and and play behind a Reckhamstraw or an Arnold, and as you say, if they sign Davis, I don't see him signing Slay. I'd see them going younger in the draft. I personally believe Slay can still start a corner for him for 1 year. I think in a 1 year, just a 1 year sample size, I think Slay could play just as well, might be in a minority, just as well as Davis. Davis would be more important to have if you can obviously get him for 3 years at a high level. But I would take Slay over Davis, in a one-on-one right now. I really would, and you can re-sign a corner next year. But I'm a big Slay guy, but I just don't. Why would he come to Detroit in his final season just to sit the pine?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up actually because I don't think he would just be a bench player. I think he would be great as like a cornerback 3 or 4 for us. I think he's above Rakestraw. He's above. I think him and Amik are right next to each other, but Amik's our slot corner. I think he would be that first guy in the rotation outside of Arnold and Davis for that outside corner, and I think that's exactly what he wants. Really, I think he's entering his mid 30s, and he's going, I want to win a Super Bowl, but I don't necessarily want to be the guy anymore. I don't want to have to go cover Justin Jefferson twice a year for a whole game. He's like, I'm good on that, but I'll come off the bench and give him some work sometimes. And I also think, like he said, those are his two places. So if he doesn't come here, he's going to retire. And I think as of right now, his idea is he's playing next year. And I mean, I don't think he would sign on for a $1 million contract or anything like that. I don't think it's one of those situations. But as long as we give him a respectable deal, I think at minimum 7 million, I think he'll come, and I think the rest will fall in line. But with that being said, James, you have the floor.
You pretty much took the words directly out of my mouth. If he is willing to come off the bench, um, not makes it sound like a basketball team, but be that first guy kind of in the rotation. Obviously, we talked about with the D line, people get hurt. Davis got hurt. Davis broke his jaw. There's no guarantee Davis comes back. When he was traded for, we restructured his deal, so he is a free agent. So he's gonna have to re-sign here. Um, Obviously, we have Terry Arnold and Enos Rakestraw, who are rookies. Rakestraw missed pretty much his entire rookie season. So I would love to have Slay back. I would bring Slay and once again, it's going to be a common theme for me if you follow me on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. Um, I will say for the right price, a ton. A 1 year, $7 million deal, I would do that, no problem. And I would try to bring Davis back still. But and what might be a controversial take because I am a big stat and box score guy. Stats tell a lot. And as you said, Slay had one of, if not his absolute best season in terms of pass breakups and whatnot. But for the corner position, I believe that some of his stats were up because his guys were getting open. So he got tested more often and thrown at more often. So naturally, he would have more pass deflections as well. He would have more opportunities for that. I don't think he completely lost it by any means, but I do think he is a step behind. So, like you said, he would have value as a veteran. He has value as a player, um, but I would not be comfortable putting him on Justin Jefferson one on one and saying, "All right, go get him."
Yeah, and I totally get that. That's a good point. The one thing I will say with that is he actually had a worse, or he allowed a worse completion percentage this year than he has as an Eagle since 2021. He only allowed 51% of passes completed, whereas last year was 64%. So I think that, could go into that. Maybe, I don't know if he's lost a full step, since he got traded to the Eagles, but he's definitely not as good as he used to be. So that's definitely a good point. Now, moving on, let's talk a little bit of non-Lion stuff for a second. Let's talk about some quarterback landing spots. This, for me, is a pretty hot topic in the NFL as a whole. Obviously, the Aaron Rodgers, Sam Darnold, Russell Wilson, we know about those guys. But then there's guys like Justin Fields who are also available who, could go somewhere like, I don't know, the New York Jets, let's say, just for instance, and join Aaron Glenn on a 1 year deal. That way they don't have to force themselves to get a quarterback this year. But let's start with Aaron Rodgers, and we'll open this to a panel for each quarterback. But Aaron Rodgers, right? I personally believe, and you might call me crazy, he's still a good quarterback. I think he is. I think last year showed that, and I think, not to get political, but a lot of people who dislike him are because of his political stances and not necessarily because of what he put on the field. Now, does that mean he is Aaron Rodgers that we saw in 2018 in Green Bay? Definitely not. He's not that guy anymore. But he's a Kirk Cousins type now. He's a guy that you could sign if you're like, let's say Minnesota. Like, let's say Minnesota lets Sam Darnold walk. They could add Aaron Rodgers. And I don't know if they'll win a Super Bowl with him or anything like that, but it'll give them a solid bridge quarterback. Now, don't get me wrong. Aaron Rodgers is not a top 10 quarterback in the league anymore. He's more of like a high teens, low 20s type of guy now. But that's still a guy that you can win some games with as a bridge quarterback. I don't think he's pushing anybody over the top by any means or anything like that. But one of my favorite landing spots for him is the New York Giants for a few different reasons, because I think the Giants are in that position. Even if they do draft a Shedeur Sanders, they need a guy to help out for a year. That way he stays in New York. But Minnesota, I think, is the obvious one if they let Darnold walk. I don't see them handing the keys to this team to JJ right now just because of how good they were last season. And at least if you sign Rodgers, you can have a guy who can start the first 4 games while JJ works his way back. That's really the main thing I have because I still think JJ's the guy there. But I just think they need a guy who can be a bridge type guy. And that could be anybody, but I think Rodgers makes a lot of sense because if JJ's not looking up to par, I think Rodgers could still win you some games. Now, Brad, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, I think we all know Aaron Rodgers is a very polarizing quarterback. If we're going to say he's a polarizing figure because of political reasons, I just think he keeps political reasons the hell out of football. We're here to play football. We're here to enjoy a sport. We're here to get an escape from politics and escape from political correctness or what have you. Uh, but having said that, I wouldn't want Aaron Rodgers anywhere near J.J. McCarthy. I think J.J. McCarthy is a strong-minded person, but you ask Jordan Love how much Aaron Rodgers helped him. So if you're going to send him over to Minnesota to be some kind of mentor, oh boy, you know what? I hope they do. I hope they do, being a Lions fan. It's nothing personal for me with Rodgers. I just don't think he's any good anymore. I don't see why he would go to the Giants. I'm sure the Giants would open him with open arms. I don't know why, but they would. Again, if you want to draft Shedeur Sanders, he ain't going to help him. He's not going to help him at all. I think a great, perfect landing spot for Aaron Rodgers is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this is why. Mike Tomlin won't put up with shit from Rodgers. He will not put up with shit. And I think that is one alpha dog that can actually top the other alpha dog and say, this is the way it happens. This is the way it's going to be. So I think Pittsburgh, absolutely. Pittsburgh could be. The only thing that scares me is Pittsburgh's line. Can they keep him upright? I think we saw with the Jets that he got knocked around like a rag doll. But, to sum it up, yeah, shit, send him to the Vikings, please, because I think he would crumble like a cookie. And I think he would also taint J.J. McCarthy to the point of, I shouldn't go that far. I don't want to say that, but McCarthy, he wouldn't get anything out of Aaron Rodgers. But Pittsburgh, I like Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I really like Pittsburgh too. That was the other team I was going to bring up. The only thing I would say that about Pittsburgh is I don't know if that's true about Tomlin, not taking any shit. I mean, Antonio Brown, Big Ben, Le'Veon Bell. There's a lot of guys throughout their history. George Pickens right now. There's a lot of guys throughout their history where he kind of lets them do them. And I think that, could be a positive for them. Or for Rodgers too. And maybe that might, make Rodgers play a little better. I don't know. But I do like Pittsburgh as well. But James, you got anything for this?
The only thing I can really add is, to me, it has to be Minnesota, just because he has to continue to follow the Favre arc, going from Green Bay his whole career to the Jets to Minnesota. Um,
Oh, yeah.
and as Brad said, I think personally, Rodgers is just toxic for younger quarterbacks. He has not helped many, and no, I'm not in the locker room, and obviously I'm not behind the scenes, but very few, if any, have good stories to tell about him. He's a selfish player. I personally don't like the fit in Pittsburgh because, although, like you said, Jace, Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, he's dealt with personalities in his time in Pittsburgh, but those are star players. Rodgers is, with all due respect to him, a shell of his former self. And I do think he can still start in the league with a team, but like you said, kind of like a Kirk Cousins, no one's afraid of Rodgers. No one's thinking, oh crap, Rodgers is coming to town. How are we going to play him? Like, his best days are behind him. So I would love for him to go to Minnesota. And as much as I love JJ, I love the Wolverines. He's a Viking now, so go ahead and ruin him, whatever.
Yeah,
Kirby
and
Joseph would love him going to the Vikings as well.
Yeah.
yeah. So the only thing with that is, did either of you guys watch that Rogers documentary on Netflix?
I did. I
Okay.
did.
I did not.
I think that the way he talked about how he was towards Jordan Love, he would do the exact opposite if he got another chance. Because in that documentary, Jordan Love stuff happened before, and the viewers, you can have your own opinion about psychedelic whatevers and all that crap. That's not what we're talking about right now. But like, he seems like he's thinking about stuff differently after it, and that Jordan Love stuff happened before that. So it's like, not saying that this is the case, but it could be that now he's more willing to be a mentor because he knows he's not at that spot anymore in his career, in terms of how his own play is going. So maybe he knows, like, hey, I'm getting brought into Minnesota to kind of be their bridge guy and help their young kid, and that's what I'm going to do. And not to say that definitely would happen, but I think there's a higher likelihood he would do that now than he did before with Jordan. Um, but with that being said, we will wrap this up with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. These are two very intriguing names for me because I still think Russell Wilson is a pretty damn good quarterback. I mean, same with Aaron Rodgers. He's not a top 10 quarterback, but I think Wilson's a little bit better than Rodgers is right now. I think Wilson still has a bit of mobility to him. And he showed last year in Pittsburgh he can still throw the ball around a little bit. And I think Russell Wilson would be great with the Jets. Okay. Call me crazy here, right? Because not his play would be great. I'm not saying he'd return to his elite form. But I think he fits what Aaron Glenn's looking for: a leader, a true, um, like, good guy, like a Jared Goff type. You know what I mean? But Russell Wilson's been around for longer. I think you'd sign him to a 1 year deal to be your bridge guy, of course, but that gives them a decent quarterback to make it through the season. And I think, I mentioned Justin Fields to the Jets before, but I think Wilson fits better there, simply because he's older. He provides that veteran mentor, leadership. And I think Glenn would kind of appreciate who Russell Wilson is, if that makes any sense. I think a lot of the places he's gone don't necessarily appreciate him for who he is. I think Mike Tomlin did a pretty good job with that. But I think it would be kind of similar with Aaron Glenn if he went there. Now, the Titans could make some sense too, for similar reasons, but I just think the Jets make the most sense because he has a true wide receiver one. And not to say that he'd go there and they'd be a playoff team, but I think they could be a solid team next year, like 6 to 8 wins. But with that being said, Brad, floor is yours.
When we talk about Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, it's almost like it brings me to thinking about that Spider-Man meme where each one's pointing at each other. I think Justin Fields, is has a lot of traits of Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson just happened to play for Pete Carroll and actually be mentored pretty well. Justin Fields, hell, he didn't have any mentors in Chicago. I think he got a year out of Mike Tomlin, which is good for him. But yeah, Russell Wilson to the Raiders, I think would be absolutely fabulous for a couple of reasons. He'd be reunited with Pete Carroll, which you definitely can't go wrong there. I know those two were very tight, obviously, in Seattle and have a lot of admiration for each other. And also, if Raiders go with, say, a guy like Shadur Sanders, well, there is a guy who will mentor Shadur because, like you said, Russell Wilson is a good guy. So I would definitely think that the Raiders would be very, very interested in Russell Wilson.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I really like the Pete Carroll connection that you made there. I honestly didn't even think about that. But with that being said, James, what do you have on the Russell Wilson front?
I somewhat agree with both of you, but at the same time, kind of going back to our Aaron Rodgers talk, is I think Russell Wilson is the guy that you said Aaron Rodgers was. I think if Russell Wilson can sign like a 1 year deal with the Vikings, because he does still have something in the tank, he does still have mobility, and the Vikings don't have the best O line. But he can still throw it, like you said, and if you give him Hawkinson and Justin Jefferson and Addison to throw to, he can make things happen. And that gives JJ the luxury of letting his knee fully heal up, getting mentored, as you said, because Russell Wilson is a good guy and will mentor a young quarterback. They have a similar rollout mobility play style. I feel like Russell Wilson would be the perfect fit for Minnesota, as much as I would hate that because I think that's a good fit. Um, and then as far as Justin Fields goes, I was thinking the Raiders for Justin Fields, similar because, as you were saying, they are similar players. And Pete Carroll did a lot of good things with a young Russell Wilson. And I don't think Fields has the arm that Russell Wilson has, but he might have more legs and more mobility. And that is one thing. I've been a pretty known Fields hater, but no one can deny his athletic ability in his run game. So I feel like Pete Carroll can get the most out of him. So I kind of like the Raiders for Fields rather than Wilson.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point. The Raiders make a lot of sense for Fields, and that's actually what I was going to say for Fields was my favorite pick. And I actually really like the idea of I don't like it as a Lions fan, but the idea of Russell Wilson on the Vikings for football purposes, I do like that fit a lot. But with that being said, like I said, I was going to say Fields for the Raiders simply because I think they're a little bit farther off right now. I also like Justin Fields for the Titans. I think Justin Fields in Tennessee it would make a lot of sense. They don't have to take a quarterback at one. They have Levis and Fields that, whoever's the better guy takes that job the next year. And like you guys both mentioned, he offers that mobility that really nobody else on this free agent or really the draft at quarterback, there's really nobody as mobile as Justin Fields. And if that's your type, if that's what you really like, and we mentioned AR with the Raiders for similar reasons. If that's your type, if that's what you like, why not give him a 1 year or 2 year, let's say 2 year 20 million or 1 year, 10, and just kind of see what you got with him. But Brad, you got
Yeah,
anything to add?
yeah. With Justin Fields, I didn't speak on that real quick, but I think another pretty damn good fit, and that goes along with a Spider-Man meme with Wilson. What about Seattle? Seattle, I think, could be getting almost a younger version of Geno Smith, and Geno's worked pretty well there. So I don't even know if Geno's. Sorry to sound ignorant on this. I don't even know if Geno Smith is indeed a free agent. I don't think he is, but I think his deal's coming up pretty soon. I could be wrong, but I wouldn't mind seeing Justin Fields in Seattle.
Yeah, and that makes some sense. There have been Geno Smith, trade rumors flying around, and the Seahawks. On another note, are there's rumors of them trading DK Metcalf, which we'll see how real those rumors are. I've heard rumors recently that they're not looking to trade him, but I also heard that the Packers were somewhat close. So you know how that goes. It'll be a probably closer to draft day if DK did get traded, if at all. I don't see it though. But with that being said, speaking of wide receivers being traded, to kind of wrap this show up, we have Debo Samuel was just traded for a fifth round pick to the Commanders, which a lot of people think Debo's washed. A lot of people are saying on Twitter, Debo's trash. The Commanders. I was surprised they got him for a fifth round pick. A lot of people are saying they should have gave up a sixth or a seventh at most. Okay, I had an argument on Twitter, and I might go on a little bit of a tangent on this one, but Debo Samuel was he was used so well that 1 year. I think it was 2021 when he had like 1,800 total yards and like 15 total or 18 total touchdowns, something like that. Um, I just feel Debo is not washed. He's just been injured, and Brandon Ayuk has kind of taken over that wide receiver one spot, right? I think Debo every year other than 1 year outside of his injury seasons where he missed like 8 to 10 games, he's had over 1,000 yards from scrimmage every single season in the NFL, which I think is pretty valuable. I mean, as a wide receiver who can run the ball, he can play slot, he can play outside. I think it's the perfect dream come true for Washington. Jaden Daniels has his guy over the middle. He's got his guy that he can feel really good about throwing a quick slant, and he's gonna do what he needs to do with it. And also, they have another guy they can use in the backfield with Robinson and Eckler. And I just really really love the fit, especially for a fifth round pick. They're only paying him like I don't know if they're paying the whole cap hit. I know his cap hit was 21 million. I think they're paying a decent portion of that, but still, that's a steal in my opinion. And I mean, maybe you'll disagree, but I just feel the Commanders did that was a really good move on their part, and it's still like we mentioned before, it keeps them in the Myles Garrett conversation. But with that said, Brad, floor's yours.
Wow, an argument on Twitter. I've never heard of that before. um, yeah, no, I'm with you 100% here. In fact, I actually had a chill go down my spine, and not in a good way. I think that Deebo Samuel is going to come back true to form. And the reason I say this is much like you mentioned. Deebo had Brock Purdy, and Brock Purdy is not exactly the most athletic type. He's got some movement to him, but he is not Jaden Daniels. I mean, you can line up Samuel anywhere on the field now. You can line him up in the backfield, out of the gun with Jaden Daniels. There's so much creativity you have now. You can scheme so many ways. It's just he's just a speed bullet still, and it's a perfect fit for the Commanders. And I don't like it for us, but the Commanders, they hit a home run here, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree. The other thing that I was going to mention is Terry McLaurin. I think and Debo fit perfectly together too with their styles. Terry McLaurin being more of an over the top, deep route kind of guy, and Debo being more of your short to intermediate. I feel like him and Ayuk were similar in that way, where they're more of short to intermediate receivers. So Ayuk ended up getting more of those targets. So I think on a fantasy aspect, especially, Debo should have a bit of a better season this year. But James, floor is yours.
Uh, I'm in familiar territory here as being on an island. I'm on Team Wash. Um, he still has value. I'm not going to say he's washed in terms of a player. I don't think he's like Aaron Rodgers, where he's not going to make a difference. He still can. He can still be a productive member on your football team, but I do not think he's a wide receiver one anymore. I don't think the offense is. He's the type of player that the offense is going to run through anymore. Um, you make a good point. I mean, he's going to have McLaren as his number one there, but like you said, being the speed deep ball guy McLaren is, he kind of reminds me style wise of an Ayuk who he did have in San Francisco. And as Brad mentioned, he is going to be working with a much better quarterback, in my opinion, now. He's coming off one of his worst years in his career. I had just pulled his stats up. It's his second worst catch rate of his career last year. He has yet to play. He's 28. He's going to be 29 next season. He has yet to play all 16 games in a season in his career. He is always hurt. He's always battling something. I know a lot of people remember him from his 21 season where he just completely went off. A lot of people like him and whatnot. I know he was on the receiver Netflix show and all that. Um, I for 20 million or 21 million or whatever you said, I don't see it. I just don't see the value there. So I'm not saying he's a bad player, but for the cost, I don't see it as a positive move. I know they only gave up the fifth round pick, and that's practically nothing unless you have a GM like Brad Holmes. But I just don't see that being as much of a game changer as some people make it out to be. But that's just my 2 cents. I've been wrong before. So,
Yeah, and I totally understand that, outlook on it. I just think that, like for me, I never saw Debo as a true wide receiver one. He's not. He's not a true like stud receiver. He's not. But what he is a weapon, right? And I think that is why it's such a big deal, such a good trade for the Commanders. Because, yeah, you're right. He's not a wide receiver one, and yeah, you're right. He's not worth 21 million as a wide receiver. But if you look at what he does as a wide receiver, I'd say that's worth 13, 14, somewhere in there, 15. If you look at what he does as a running back, that's probably worth, 5 or 6. So that's when you get to that number, I think, is because of the value he brings at both positions. And now, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't pay him 21 million on the open market by any means, but I think when you're talking about a guy whose contract, you're just getting and you can cut him after next year, I really like the deal for the Commanders, and I really don't like it for us, like Brad said before. But with that being said, we have another wide receiver who is on the block by the name of Cooper Kupp. A lot of nothing has been happening on this front. They came out and said he was going to get traded, I think a month ago, and I haven't heard a peep. Have you guys heard anything?
I have heard nothing. I have not heard, and I was going to bring that up. I thought he was, on Survivor, on a desert island somewhere. But no, I have not heard anything out of Cooper Kupp.
Which I just find very wild.
Mm-hmm.
because he's a good receiver. I would say he's on the same level as Debo, if not a little better right now as a receiver. I don't know if I would give up a fifth round pick just because he's getting 19 million. Obviously, the Lions, I don't think we should trade for him at all. But if you're a team like Carolina or a team like Houston who is in on Debo, or um, a team like the Patriots who have a ton of money. I If I'm the Patriots, I'm floating a seventh rounder. I don't care. I'm saying, hey, look, man, this is what I got. If you want him, if you want to get rid of him, I'll take him. If you don't get a better offer, just so you don't have to cut him. It's one of those deals, just so you kind of beat the waiver wire. But with that being said, James, what are your thoughts?
Um, as I stated before, I watch a lot of Rams football. I grew up a Rams fan before I learned the importance of having hometown pride because I got into football a little bit later. I grew up with hockey and baseball, and by the time I started watching football, I was watching Charlie Batch on the Lions, or I was watching Kurt Warner, Torrey Holt, Marshall Faulk, Isaac Bruce on the Rams with the greatest offensive show on turf. So I was watching a lot of Rams games there. Um, which these two teams are so intertwined, which I don't want to go off on too far of a tangent because the Stafford and Goff thing, and then we met in the playoffs, we opened the season with them, yada yada yada. But in the one, two, three, four, five, six, Kupp has now completed 8 seasons in the NFL, and he has only surpassed 1,000 yards twice. So 6 out of his 8 years, he hasn't surpassed 1,000 yards. Now we're dealing with an extra 17th game. He is also one, just like Debo, that's battling injuries. He has not played in more than 12 games in each of the last 3 seasons. So he is constantly beat up. I have heard rumors, just online, nothing of significant note, but I have heard rumors of people linking him to the Lions. Um, I don't really know. At 19, like, I'd rather have Cooper Kupp for 19 than Debo at 21, but at the same time, I would prefer neither at that price tag. I agree with you on New England. New England has an infinite number of cap space. I honestly think they do have over like 90 million or something like that in cap space.
I think they're at 128.
Oh
What?
my God.
Okay, I was gonna say 100, and I'm just like that's not right. I'm gonna uh, leave the door cracked and say 90, but yeah, they have infinite cap space. They have no one at receiver, and I know people are going to yell at me about Jacoby Myers, but whatever. They have no one at receiver. So for New England, I would absolutely throw them like a fifth, fourth, whatever. In terms of the Lions, I know there's the golf connection from the past. There's the Brad Holmes connection from the past. I do think he can be serviceable in our offense, but this is another Jonah Jackson thing to me. I don't like his current price tag, so if he gets cut, I'll call him and see if we can work something out cheaper. But I'm not paying his current rate for. I mean, I honestly think he would be wide receiver 3 here. I don't see him taking away JMO reps. I don't see him taking. I know he wouldn't take away St. Brown reps. Um, at this stage in his career, I would even debate on if he would get more targets than Laporta. So I'm out as a Lions fan on this, but yes, I would be all over this if I was New England or maybe even the Raiders. Again, I know we're talking a ton about them, but a different team. He's got a spot in the NFL. I just don't think it's for the Rams or the Lions.
Yeah, and I can completely agree with that. I definitely agree with the point of it's kind of a Jonah Jackson type situation. If he gets cut, why not? For the right price. But that's just because we're a team that's loading up, and it'd be fun. At the end of the day, it's not like
Yeah.
it's a real need. And like I mentioned earlier, we can draft a receiver in like the fourth or fifth round to play that X, and then I don't really know if we need another one at all, really. So Cooper Cup might just be icing on the top, I guess. But with that being said, that was our first episode. I appreciate everybody for watching. James, you can go ahead and tell them where to find you.
You can find me on X at my last name Gullet_James, and that's pretty much the only
And then,
social I
Brad, where
use.
are you at?
You can find me on X at BT8Ball.
All right. And you can find us all writing articles at misportsmedia.com and follow us on Twitter at misportsmedia so you don't miss an update. I appreciate you guys for watching, like I said, but that'll do it for this one. We'll see you on the next one.